Imagine this. You're standing in the middle of a storm, wind roaring in your ears, debris flying all around you. People are shouting, pointing fingers, chaos everywhere. Your natural instinct: shout back, defend yourself, fight to be heard above the noise. But what if I told you that the strongest, sharpest weapon you could ever wield isn't your voice, or your fists, or even your arguments, but silence? What if staying calm in that storm didn't just protect you, but completely turned the battle in your favor? Welcome to today's video, where we're going to uncover a hidden power that has been used by philosophers, warriors, and leaders for thousands of years. This isn't just a self-help tip or some motivational fluff. This is a deep, timeless strategy for outsmarting manipulators, disarming conflict, and reclaiming your own inner peace no matter what the world throws at you. Here's the truth most people never realize. Every time you explode in anger, every time you rush to defend yourself, every time you feel like you have to explain why you're right and they're wrong, you're actually handing control over to someone else. You become their puppet, dancing to the tune they play. The people who truly hold power aren't the ones shouting the loudest, they're the ones who remain unshaken while everyone else burns out their energy. In this video, we're going to dive into 3 powerful Stoic techniques that will completely change the way you respond to conflict. These aren't abstract ideas. These are practical, step-by-step strategies you can use in your job, your relationships, even on social media when trolls try to drag you into endless battles. We'll cover how to break free from emotional manipulation, how to flip the balance of power with a single sentence, and how to build an inner shield so strong that nothing can pierce it. And listen carefully, because these lessons could save you from destroying relationships, losing opportunities, or making mistakes that you can't undo. One moment of lost control has ended careers, wrecked marriages, and sparked wars. But one moment of calm has also changed the course of history. I'll even share stories of people like Nelson Mandela and Marcus Aurelius, who use these exact principles to maintain dignity and strength when surrounded by enemies. By the end of this video, you'll not only understand why manipulators want you angry, but you'll know exactly how to stay calm, confident, and in control no matter what they throw at you. You'll see how silence can be the sharpest blade, and how walking away from the game entirely is the ultimate checkmate. But before we dive in, if you want to master your mind, protect your peace, and grow alongside a community of people who refuse to be manipulated, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with anyone who needs it. And if you'd like to support this channel directly, so we can keep making deep, meaningful content like this, you can click the super thanks button below to donate. Every bit of support helps us create better videos and reach more people who are ready to break free from the chaos. Stay with me until the very end, because the final Stoic technique we'll cover will make you immune to manipulation for life. You'll never see conflict the same way again. Anger rarely announces itself as your own. It often arrives as an implanted urge seeded by someone who knows exactly which tone, shrug, or smirk will hook your attention and hijack your body. Peter Tamiting Zudethi Akora Linsbak deliver Akuting Liner Govedu Anai Set Tut by Zonghetlen Chuk and Azipo Op Chuka Valida Tezap. You feel the burn in your chest, the heat rising up your neck, the instant compulsion to fight back. That sequence is not random. It's a stimulus response loop that manipulators count on because the physiology of indignation is fast, loud, and public, while the quiet act of reframing is slow, private, and crucially invisible to the room. Epictetus's line people are disturbed not by things, but by their view of things was not an abstract slogan. It was a diagnostic. The insult isn't what defeats you. The story you tell yourself in the next 2 seconds is what does the damage. They disrespected me, so I must restore respect now. Everyone is judging me unless I retaliate. If I let this pass, I look weak. These interpretations, not the words themselves, tip you into the fight the other person designed. Once you understand that, you can also see why classic manipulation rarely looks like open warfare. There's a reason: guilt baiting, passive aggression, and false concerns show up more often than raised voices. These tactics are efficient. Gu bài tin sau tất cả những gì tôi làm cho bạn nỡ rời đi sao? Levedit job phi. Existing self-image as a decent person. It reframes neutrality as betrayal and paints your autonomy as ingratitude. The move isn't to argue details, it's to shift your moral center, to make you fear the social cost of being principled. Passive aggression, tui ban thoi, and the door slam spares the manipulator accountability. They can always claim you're overreacting, while inflicting maximum ambiguity. Ambiguity forces you to do emotional labor. Are they actually upset? Am I the problem? Should I fix it? The cost is that you start managing their feelings instead of your boundaries. Folk concern mọi người nói bạn nhạy cảm quá đó pretense to deliver social pulp. It smuggles in a crowd you cannot verify and recasts your reasonable reaction as pathology. The goal is not to win a debate, but to erode your confidence so you police yourself on their behalf. What makes these moves so potent is not only their psychology, but also their timing. In the moment of a jab, your body sprints ahead of your prefrontal cortex. Cortisol spikes. Your attentional field narrows. Memory pulls up the worst-case scenario instead of the base rate. Seneca, calling anger a brief madness, was describing this neurobehavioral collapse before neuroscience had the vocabulary for amygdala hijack. Your voice gets sharper because your body is trying to protect status. Your face flushes because the sympathetic nervous system is mobilizing. Your thoughts become binary because nuance is metabolically expensive under threat. Isn't this physiological? Tunnel that you stop being yourself, or more precisely, you stop being the version of yourself that chooses. You become highly predictable, and the predictable opponent is the easiest to defeat, because their next three moves write themselves. Now look at the strategic layer. The game is not simply insult reaction. It's insult public reaction narrative control. Manipulators are not optimizing for truth, they're optimizing for tape. A clipped video, a retold story, a facial expression captured at the worst angle. These are the trophies. In the public arena, one bad minute often weighs more heavily than 100 quiet hours of competence. That's why the examples you cited feel so disproportionate. A CEO's 1-minute meltdown can dent market confidence because it reframes the leader not as fallible human in a stressful moment, but as risk factor. A politician's snapped retort in a debate becomes the meme that eats the policy agenda. The content of the insult often fades. The visible loss of composure remains. On the chessboard of power, the one who topples their own king flips a table, throws a mic, storms off, saves the other side the effort of checkmate. Let's make this concrete and familiar. If you've ever been stuck in traffic and someone cut you off, you felt the reflex, a honk, a gesture, maybe the urge to speed up to teach them a lesson. But notice the structure. A stranger's minor violation tries to rent space in your nervous system for the next 15 minutes. That desire to reclaim justice on the spot is exactly the lever. Manipulators pull in meetings, group chats, and family dinners. The domain is different. The loop is the same. Or think about customer service. A representative mispronounces your name for the third time and sounds like they don't care. The part of you that wants to set the record straight right now is the same part a savvy coworker tries to trigger with a smirk. Daily life is full of those little hooks. The difference in outcomes is whether you swallow the hook with the bait. Guilt baiting deserves a deeper look because it borrows your virtues against you. Most conscientious people want to be fair, generous, and appreciative. When someone says, "After everything I've done for you," they're not asking for a conversation about facts. They're asserting a debt. The debt is undefined and therefore unpayable. If you accept the frame, you start negotiating against your own interests. The practical tell is urgency. Right now, this instant before you leave. Urgency is a red flag in manipulation because clarity shrinks under time pressure. The antidote is neutral inquiry and time. I appreciate your help. What specific contribution are you referring to? And what are you asking for now? The moment you name the ask, the fog thins. In close relationships, guilt often shows up as, if you loved me, you would. That's not a request. That's a trapdoor. Real requests can be negotiated. Trapdoors can only be fallen through. You can step aside by refusing the premise. Passive aggression thrives on plausible deniability. Tui ban thoi is a content-less sentence with a loaded delivery. The slam supplies the content. You will be tempted to litigate tone. Why are you slamming the door? But that only invites a performance. I didn't slam it. You're overreacting. The effective response is to make the implicit explicit without accusation. It seems there's something you want me to know. I'm willing to. Discuss it when you're ready to speak plainly. The phrasing matters. You're not diagnosing, you're mad, which they can reject. You're describing impact and setting terms. In teams, passive aggression kills clarity. Tasks get forgotten. Emails receive vague replies. Deadlines slip with a smiling sure. A practical countermeasure is to move all commitments to written, time-stamped channels and to ask for confirmations that require a yes/no. Passive aggression shrinks in environments where accountability is routine and documentation is boringly thorough. False concern is difficult because it impersonates care. People are saying you're too sensitive. Sounds like feedback, but functions like social pressure. It conjures an invisible jury. The cure is to request names, contexts, and examples. Who said that? When? In response to what? If the answer is always missed, you're not dealing with feedback, but dealing with steering. Honest concern is anchored in specifics and paired with a desire to help you improve. False concern stays vague and insists that the problem is who you are, not what you did. In leaders, a useful sentence is, I don't act on anonymous sentiment. Bring me specific behaviors I can evaluate. That does two things. It deflates the rumor economy and rewards clarity. Return to the meeting. Scene and slow it down like a coach reviewing game tape. The jab lands. You feel the flush. At this fork, two stories are possible. In the first, you cut off the speaker, your voice tight, and the energy in the room spikes. A few faces light up. Conflict is entertaining, and someone pulls out a phone under the table. In 30 seconds, you've confirmed the attacker's insinuation. See? They can't handle pressure. In the second story, you let the silence expand just long enough to regulate your breathing, and you respond with a sentence that returns the burden of clarity. You're implying a pattern of failure. Can you specify the decisions you're referring to and the impact they had? That is three things. It reframes the jab as an assertion that requires evidence. It signals to the room that this will be a fact-based conversation, not a status contest. And it keeps your voice in its natural range, which subconsciously communicates control. The difference between those two stories is not personality. It's practice in the span of a handful of heartbeats. The brief madness Seneca named deserves respect because it can feel righteous from the inside. Anger often masquerades as clarity. Everything seems simple and morally obvious. But righteous anger does its best work when it is chosen, not reactive, when it is tethered to values and strategy, not to an adversary's tempo. Manipulators want you at their tempo because then they can predict you. If you're always answering the latest provocation, you're not leading, you're chasing. What makes Satya Nadella's demeanor so effective in hostile interviews is not that he suppresses emotion, but that he refuses to cede pacing. He answers at his cadence. He doesn't mirror the interviewer's intensity. The audience reads that as steadiness because it is. That calm is not passivity. It's possession of attention, breath, and agenda. Let's broaden the lens to social media, because it's a contemporary arena where this entire dynamic is amplified. The platform rewards speed, moral certainty, and spectacle. If you're baited publicly, the algorithm will carry your most unguarded second farther than your most thoughtful hour. That asymmetry is brutal if you try to correct everything in real time. The defensive posture that manipulative accounts use is well known. They launch a provocation, harvest reactions, and pivot to victimhood with "look how they're attacking me." If you engage at full volume, You supply the necessary screenshot. The Stoic move online is replies. Often it's letting your work consistent, documented, boringly reliable be the rebuttal. The key is to avoid becoming the content they need. Another everyday arena is family. In families, manipulation often comes disguised as tradition or care. In this family, we always put others first can be a cherished value and a cudgel. The line between sacrifice and self-erasure is thin. This language keeps love on the table while declining manipulation script. Over time, some relationships recalibrate. Others expose that what held them together was your willingness to absorb. Blame. Both outcomes are clarifying. Workplace culture can either starve or feed manipulation. Cultures that prize cleverness over clarity, speed over reflection, and charisma over accountability tend to reward the person who can puncture others with a smile. If remarks like, just like last time, get laughs instead of follow-up questions, the environment is teaching everyone that wit is more valuable than work. Leaders set the tone by how they respond to those micro-performances. A leader who smiles along is authorizing future ambushes. A leader who says, if there's feedback, bring the specifics. Otherwise, keep the sarcasm off the agenda, is not being humorless. They're setting a boundary around the kind of humor that corrodes trust. The most resilient teams I've seen normalized personalized postmortems. We talk about decisions, assumptions, metrics, not about identities. That keeps critique sharp and safe. It also deprives manipulators of the oxygen they need. A social reward for clever cruelty. It's worth examining the cognitive distortions that flood the mind in that brief madness, because naming them weakens them. The big three are mind reading. Everyone thinks I'm incompetent now, catastrophizing, this will ruin my standing, and personalization, that joke defines me. These are not facts, they're quick fictions. A practical technique is to audit them explicitly. What evidence do I have? Walls could be true. If my friend were in my seat, would I draw the same conclusion? The point is not to talk yourself into complacency, but to restore agency. When you slow distortion down, you regain the option to choose a response that serves your long game rather than the room's appetite for drama. There's also a subtle trap to avoid: the idea that composure means suppression. Stoicism, properly understood, is not about pretending not to feel. It's about refusing to make feelings your only compass. If you tell yourself, I must never feel anger, you add a second shame on top of the first insult. Then, when you inevitably feel angry, you judge yourself for failing to be stoic enough. That spiral is a different kind of manipulation, self-inflicted. A healthier frame is, anger is information, it is not instructions. It tells you a boundary was crossed or a value was threatened. You can thank the signal and still decide whether to act now, later, or not at all. In practice, this looks like acknowledging the hit that stung and then purchasing yourself time. Time is the currency of self-command. The pattern insult overreaction narrative loss is not inevitable. Many professionals learn to convert aggressive jabs into requests for rigor. Let's say you're presenting quarterly results and someone interjects with, "This looks like last quarter's mess all over again." The low road reply is a defense of your character. The high road move is to convert the comment into an agenda item. Okay, if you're seeing a repeat pattern, let's itemize it. Which KPI, what time horizon, and what threshold are we talking about? You've now moved the conversation from status to structure. If the interjector has substance, the team benefits. If they don't, the vacuum shows. Either way, you didn't give up composure to find out. For people who grew up in environments where loudness equaled safety, homes where the only way to be heard was to escalate, this whole playbook can feel alien or even unsafe. If I don't push back instantly, won't they walk all over me? It's a fair question. There are settings where high dominance displays deter exploitation. But even in those contexts, rehearsed, measured dominance outperforms. Flailing. Think of bouncers who never raise their voice. Think of litigators who dismantle with questions, not volume. The art is not to become passive. It's to separate intensity from impulsivity. You can be formidable without being predictable. Let's talk about recovery, because even the most disciplined among us will sometimes take the bait. Maybe you clap back. Maybe your voice gets sharp. The worst thing you can do is double down, because pride can't stomach a course correction. A powerful move is an in-moment reset. Let me pause. I don't want to continue the conversation in that tone. Here's what I propose. You don't need a grand apology tour. You need a pivot. People remember trajectories more than snapshots. A conversation that starts tense and ends clean leaves a better imprint than one that starts neutral and ends an explosion. If you rehabilitate your own moment, manipulators get something they hate, a plot line they can't weaponize. One more angle: humor. Sarcasm is the manipulator's weapon, but warm humor can be your shield. When a colleague says, "Looks like another classic flop," a non-reactive, lightly playful reply, "Phew, if only flops produced this much revenue, I'd be a genius by now." Anyway, slide 8 shows the retention curve, acknowledges the jab without feeding it. This works only if your nonverbals are relaxed. Forced humor reads as brittle, but with the right tone, you redirect attention to substance while signaling you won't be baited. The risk with humor is that it can drift into passive aggression if you're secretly trying to wound back. The test: does your quip move the room toward clarity or toward sides? If it rallies a side, skip it. Some readers worry that refusing to react rewards bad behavior. In reality, it deprives it of return on investment. Performative jabs exist because they pay attention, status, compliance. When the payoff drops, no viral clip, no visible flinch, no emotional labor from you, the behavior often migrates to where it still pays, or it mutates into something more direct that's easier to address via policy. In organizations, that means pairing personal composure with structural deterrence. Codes of conduct that penalize ad hominem shots, facilitation norms that route feedback through agenda time, and feedback training that teaches specificity. Composure is not a substitute for good governance. It's what lets you advocate for it without getting dragged into personalities. Let's anchor this with a widely relatable scenario. The group chat with friends where one person always takes a friendly roast too far. The pattern: a line about your job, your partner, your hairline, everyone laughs, and you're torn between laughing along and going silent. If you snap, the group says you can't take a joke. If you ghost, the dynamic persists. A middle path is to use the moment after the roast to set scope. I'll happily take heat for my fantasy team. My relationship is off limits. You say it once, lightly. If it happens again, you say it plainly. If it keeps happening, you're not dealing with humor, you're dealing with a boundary tester. At that point, the Stoic choice is not to win the roast, but to prune the environment. Peace is not only an inner state, it's also a curation of circles. The image of tipping your king is useful because it reframes composure as competitive, not just contemplative. You are not withdrawing from the board. You are refusing to play a losing variation. In chess, strong players avoid traps not by out-yelling the opponent, but by declining poisonous lines. They see the glitter and calculate the cost. That's what the practical Stoic does in rooms where someone is trying to farm your reaction. You can calculate the clip they want, the story they'll tell, and the day you'll waste repairing it, and you can choose a different line. The impressive move is not that you never feel the urge. It's that you don't mortgage your next week to satisfy your next 10 seconds. Finally, it helps to cultivate a few anchor questions that you can reach for in the heat of a moment, questions that shift you from the manipulated timeline back to your own. What outcome do I want from this meeting, not the next minute, the next month? If the room replays this moment, what do I want them to remember? My point or my temper? Is this a conversation or a performance? If it's a performance, do I want to be in the cast? These are not philosophical indulgences. They're tactical resets. They pivot you from defending ego to advancing aims. They also quietly teach the room what you reward: substance, specificity, steadiness. When you put all of this together, the recognition that the anger feels internal but is often externally cued, the mapping of guilt, baiting, passive aggression, and false concern, The physiology of the brief madness. The strategic stakes of narrative. Control. The practical scripts that return ambiguity to clarity. You get a picture of composure that is neither meek nor mystical. It is muscular. It is a refusal to donate your nervous system to someone else's agenda. People who master it are not necessarily the loudest, wittiest, or most intimidating in the room. They're the ones who, when attacked, become more precise. They do not pretend, not to feel. They just don't spin what they feel in the first available place. And over time, that turns rooms and teams and even families in a different direction, not toward a brittle silence, but toward a culture where the interesting thing is no longer who got a rise out of whom, but what got built while nobody was busy performing control of anyone else. When you are provoked, your brain's default wiring pushes you to react immediately. It's ancient survival programming. Thousands of years ago, if a predator lunged at you, hesitation meant death. The problem is that this same system now fires when a colleague rolls their eyes in a meeting or when someone cuts you off in traffic. Your body doesn't know the difference between a lion in the savannah and a sarcastic remark in a Zoom call. Cortisol floods your bloodstream, your heart pounds, and your rational mind goes offline. This is why arguments escalate so quickly and why, 5 minutes later, you often regret what you said or did. It's not because you're weak-willed or inherently bad-tempered. It's because your nervous system hijacked your judgment before you had a chance to choose. The concept of the golden 10 seconds is a simple yet profoundly powerful antidote to this hijacking. It's the deliberate act of pausing for just 10 seconds before responding. In those 10 seconds, something magical happens. You disrupt the automatic loop between stimulus and reaction. Imagine someone tosses a lit match toward a pile of dry leaves. If you catch it midair and blow it out, there's no fire. That's what the pause does for your anger. It prevents the spark from igniting the blaze. During this pause, you regain control over your physiology. Your breath deepens, signaling to your brain that you are safe. Your vision literally widens, tunnel vision relaxes. Most importantly, you reclaim your ability to choose your next move instead of letting the manipulator dictate it. In modern psychology, this is sometimes referred to as activating the thinking brain instead of the survival brain. The amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for fight or flight reactions, acts like an alarm system. When it's triggered, it drowns out the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, logic, and empathy. By taking 10 seconds, you're essentially buying time for the prefrontal cortex to come back online. Stoic philosophers understood this centuries before neuroscience. Their mantra, "This is the trap," is a mental cue to remind yourself that what you feel in a moment is often bait, not truth. By whispering this phrase internally, you mark the moment as a choice point rather than a foregone conclusion. Consider Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison under a brutal regime. His jailers taunted and humiliated him daily, trying to provoke a reaction that would justify harsher treatment. If Mandela had exploded even once, they would have won twice, once by breaking his dignity and again by using his outburst to confirm their narrative of him as a dangerous radical. Instead, he practiced restraint. "If I let anger control me, they win twice," he famously said. That is the essence of the golden 10 seconds. His pause wasn't passive submission. It was an active strategy to maintain sovereignty over his inner world. When he was finally released, he emerged not as a broken man, but as a leader who could negotiate peace because he had mastered himself first. This principle isn't limited to heroic figures like Mandela. It applies to everyday life in ways that are both practical and transformative. Imagine you're driving and someone cuts you off, nearly causing an accident. Your immediate reaction might be to honk, yell, or speed up to teach them a lesson. But what happens if, instead, you take a deep breath and silently count to 10? By the time you reach 10, the surge of adrenaline has subsided just enough for you to realize that escalating the situation won't improve your day, your safety, or your peace of mind. You let the other driver speed away, and you continue on without dragging their chaos into your own car. In a workplace context, the stakes can be even higher. During a high-pressure meeting, a colleague might dismiss your idea with a snide comment like, "That sounds like last quarter's failure all over again." Your body tenses, ready to defend yourself. If you react instantly, you might say something sharp that alienates the team or gives your rival ammunition. But if you pause 10 slow seconds of breath and silence, you gain perspective. You might respond with a measured question like, "Could you clarify what specific aspects you're concerned about?" That shifts the focus from personal attack to objective discussion, and it subtly signals to the group that you are calm and focused on solutions, not drama. Over time, this habit builds a reputation for steadiness, which is a form of quiet power. The first few times you try this, it will feel unnatural. Our culture often equates speed with strength. In debates, the person who fires back the quickest is seen as sharpest. On social media, instant clapbacks are celebrated. But speed is not the same as wisdom. Think about the martial art of Aikido, where the practitioner doesn't meet force with force. Instead, they pause just long enough to redirect the opponent's energy. That split-second timing makes all the difference. Your 10-second pause is the mental equivalent of this redirection. Instead of colliding with the manipulator's force, you sidestep it, leaving them off balance. It's important to note that these 10 seconds are not about suppressing your feelings. Suppression is like stuffing a beach ball underwater. It will eventually burst to the surface with more force. The pause is about acknowledgement without indulgence. You silently name what you're feeling. Anger is here, hurt is here, fear is here. By naming it, you create a small space between you and the emotion. That space is freedom. The Stoics called this the view from above, a mental technique where you zoom out and see yourself as part of a larger pattern. In 10 seconds, you can imagine looking down at the room from the ceiling, seeing everyone as figures moving through a drama. This perspective makes the provocation seem smaller and your options seem larger. Practical steps matter. Here's how to implement the golden 10 seconds. The moment you feel provoked, physically stop whatever you're doing. If you're standing, plant your feet firmly on the ground. If you're sitting, straighten your spine. Take a slow inhale through your nose, counting to 4. Hold for a brief moment. Then exhale slowly through your mouth, counting to 6. As you breathe, silently count in your mind 1, 2, 3, all the way to 10. With each number, imagine your body cooling down like water poured on a flame. Whisper internally, "This is the trap," as a reminder that the other person's goal is to capture your reaction. When you reach 10, you'll feel a subtle shift, a clearing of mental fog. Only then do you speak or act. Personal experience brings this to life. I once sat across from a notoriously difficult client in a high-stakes negotiation. Midway through, he leaned back, crossed his arms, and said loudly, "I don't think you have the competence to handle this project." My initial surge of anger was so strong I could feel my hands clench under the table. In the past, I might have snapped back. "Excuse me? You have no idea what my team is capable of." That would have turned the meeting into a battle of egos. Instead, I remember the practice. I inhaled deeply, counted slowly to 10, and repeated silently, "This is the trap." When I finally spoke, my voice was calm. "Could you share what specific concerns you have about our approach?" His demeanor shifted instantly. The attack fizzled because I didn't supply the expected explosion. By the end of the meeting, we had a constructive plan. My calm didn't just protect me, it steered the whole room. Why does this work so reliably? Because manipulators thrive on your chaos. Their strategy depends on predictability. They poke, you flare up, they exploit the flare up. When you pause, you become unpredictable. They don't know whether you'll agree, disagree, or redirect. That uncertainty unnerves them. It's like a chess player expecting you to make a blunder, only to watch you quietly move into a winning position. Over time, consistent pauses teach others that you're not an easy target. Even if they never admit it, they adjust their behavior because the cost of baiting you becomes too high. This practice also has profound internal benefits. Those 10 seconds are not just about managing external conflict. They're about reshaping your internal landscape. Each time you pause instead of reacting, you strengthen neural pathways associated with self-control. It's like lifting a weight at the gym. The first few reps are shaky, but with repetition, the muscle grows. Eventually, the pause becomes automatic. You'll find yourself naturally taking a breath in moments that used to overwhelm you. This creates a positive feedback loop. Your confidence grows, your stress decreases, and your relationships improve because people feel safer around someone who doesn't fly off the handle. The ripple effect is enormous. Think about parenting. A child screams, "I hate you," in a moment of frustration. If the parent reacts instantly with equal volume, "Don't you dare speak to me like that," the conflict escalates and the child learns that anger is met with anger. But if the parent takes 10 seconds, breathes, and then responds with calm firmness, "I hear that you're upset. Let's talk about what's really going on," the child learns that big feelings can be met with stability. Over time, this models emotional regulation for the next generation. In this way, your 10-second pause is not just self-help, it's cultural change. Of course, there will be times when you fail. You'll snap, you'll send the angry email, you'll honk the horn. That's part of being human. The key is to treat those moments as data, not destiny. Afterward, reflect, what was the trigger? Where in my body did I feel it first? How could I insert the pause earlier next time? Each failure is a rehearsal for success. Even Mandela surely had moments of internal struggle. The goal isn't perfection, it's progress. Over months and years, those small increments of control accumulate into a life defined by choice rather than reactivity. In high-stakes environments like law enforcement, emergency medicine, or military operations, the golden 10 seconds can literally save lives. Consider a police officer confronting a tense situation. If they react impulsively, someone could be harmed unnecessarily. If they pause, even for a breath, they can assess threat levels more accurately and choose a proportional response. Training programs now incorporate breathing techniques precisely for this reason. The same principle applies to surgeons in operating rooms, pilots in cockpits, and leaders in crisis management. The external context differs, but the internal mechanics are identical. Pause, breathe, regain clarity. In the end, those 10 seconds are about reclaiming authorship of your story. When you react instantly, someone else writes the script. They decide who you are in that moment. The hothead, the fool, the scapegoat. When you pause, you take the pen back. You may still feel anger, hurt, or fear, but you express it in a way that aligns with your values rather than their provocation. Over time, this builds a reputation not just for calmness, but for integrity. People come to trust that your actions are deliberate, not dictated by the chaos around you. And in a world that rewards noise, the kind of quiet strength is rare and deeply compelling. The next time you feel your blood boil, remember that the moment belongs to you. 10 seconds is all it takes to choose who you want to be. Stop, breathe, count, whisper, this is the trap. When you open your mouth to speak, let it be from a place of sovereignty, not submission. Those 10 seconds may seem small, but they're the hinge on which entire lives can turn. Manipulators operate like programmers, carefully writing lines of code designed to trigger specific responses in you. Each word, sigh, or calculated pause they use is part of script. And the moment you react emotionally, it's like hitting run on their program. They know exactly what outcome they want and which buttons to push to make you dance to their rhythm. This is why arguments with manipulative people feel so strangely predictable you can almost see the next line coming, yet you still fall into it. The key to breaking this loop isn't to argue better or outwit them logically. It's to refuse to run their code at all. When you don't provide the expected emotional reaction, the system crashes. The phrase, "I'll think about it," is deceptively simple but extraordinarily powerful because it acts like a hard reset. Those 4 words are neutral, unprovocative, and maddeningly noncommittal. They don't give the manipulator anything to work with. When someone says, After everything I've done for you, you owe me? They're expecting you to either protest, "That's not true. I never asked you for anything," or submit, "You're right, I'll do what you want." Both of those reactions feed the system. Protest keeps you on the defensive, scrambling to prove your innocence. Submission reinforces their control, teaching them that guilt tactics work. But when you calmly say, "I'll think about it," you short-circuit the loop. There's no argument to latch onto, no compliance to exploit. It's like responding to a hacker with a completely blank firewall they can't get in. The brilliance of this phrase lies in how ordinary it sounds. It's not sarcastic, aggressive, or dismissive. In fact, it's a statement that no reasonable person can object to. Who can argue with the idea of thinking something over? That plausible innocence is what makes it so disarming. If you said, "Leave me alone," they could accuse you of hostility. If you said, "You're manipulating me," they'd pivot to victim mode. "I can't believe you'd accuse me of that." But "I'll think about it" leaves them nothing to attack. It's a verbal judo move, redirecting their force back onto them without throwing a single punch. Picture this in action. A coworker says, "You should stay late tonight. After all, I covered for you last week." This is textbook guilt baiting. Most people would feel the need to defend themselves. "Well, I had a family emergency," or "You didn't actually cover that much." But those defenses invite more attack. "So now my effort doesn't count?" You always have an excuse. Instead, you take a breath, keep your tone calm, and say, "I'll think about it." There's no escalation, no energy for them to feed on. They might try again, raising the stakes. "You're so selfish. You never think about the team." You repeat, evenly, "I'll think about it." Now the dynamic flips. They're left flailing, throwing hooks into empty air, while you remain grounded. This technique works because manipulators are playing a game of emotional chess. Their goal isn't just to win the current point, it's to lure you into a position where they control the whole board. When you refuse to move the way they expect, you disrupt their strategy. They experience confusion because they can't predict you. Confusion often leads to frustration, and frustration eventually exposes their tactics to bystanders. Suddenly, they look like the unreasonable one, while you appear composed and rational. In this way, your calm response becomes a mirror that reflects their behavior back to them. Professional athletes understand this principle deeply. Rafael Nadal, one of the greatest tennis players in history, faces not just physical opponents, but also psychological warfare. Reporters sometimes ask provocative questions designed to unsettle him before big matches. Fans might heckle him from the stands. Opponents might try subtle gamesmanship, like delaying serves or questioning calls to disrupt his focus. Nadal's genius isn't just his forehand, it's his unshakable demeanor. He answers questions briefly and calmly, never taking the bait. His body language stays neutral, his routine steady. The more chaos swirls around him, the more consistent he becomes. This unnerves his opponents because they can't hook his attention. Watching Nadal is like seeing a living embodiment of "I'll think about it." He doesn't literally say the words, but his entire presence communicates that message. "I will not give you my mind to play with." Negotiations in business operate on the same psychological plane. A skilled negotiator knows that silence and neutrality are often more powerful than eloquence. Imagine you're at the table with a supplier who suddenly says, "If you don't agree to these terms today, we'll take our business elsewhere and your project will collapse." That's pure emotional leverage, designed to induce panic and rush you into a bad decision. The natural impulse is to scramble. Wait, we can figure something out." But that shows them exactly where your pain point is. Instead, you breathe, maybe sip your water, and calmly reply, "I'll think about it." Those 4 words reclaim time and space. They signal that you're not operating on their artificial deadline. More importantly, they deprive the other party of the emotional data they were fishing for. Without that data, their bluff often collapses. I experienced this personally with a Korean client who loved to use urgency as a weapon. In one meeting, he slammed his hand on the table and declared, "You must deliver this feature by tomorrow." or the whole project will fail. My team looked at me, tense and ready for conflict. Inside, my adrenaline spiked. I wanted to argue that his demand was impossible and unfair. But I remember the principle. I kept my face calm and simply said, "I'll think about it." The room went silent. He blinked, clearly thrown off. By the end of the meeting, he had dialed back his demand and was ready to negotiate realistic deadlines. My calm didn't just protect me, it reset the entire dynamic. Some people worry that saying, "I'll think about it," sounds weak, like you're avoiding conflict. In reality, it's a power move. Weakness is when you let someone else dictate the tempo of your reaction. Strength is choosing your own tempo. Think of it like boxing. A reckless fighter swings wildly, burning energy and leaving openings. A disciplined fighter controls distance and timing, striking only when it serves their strategy. "I'll think about it" is that controlled timing. It tells the other person, "I am not in your ring. I fight on my terms." There's a fascinating psychological reason this works. Human beings are wired for narrative. Closure. When someone says something provocative, they expect a certain storyline. Attack, counterattack, escalation. If you don't provide the expected next line, it creates cognitive dissonance. Their brain scrambles to fill the gap, often with increasingly erratic behavior. This is why manipulators sometimes double down after you stay calm. They may shout louder, cry harder, or bring in reinforcements. They're trying desperately to complete the script. If you maintain your neutrality through this storm, they eventually exhaust themselves. The scene collapses because you never entered it. Think about social media trolls. Their entire ecosystem depends on engagement. If you respond to their insults, even to defend yourself, you've given them exactly what they wanted. Attention. They feed off that energy and come back for more. But if you ignore them or reply with something utterly neutral like, "I'll think about it," there's no payoff. It's like trying to start a fire with wet wood. The interaction fizzles. Over time, many trolls move on to easier targets. This is the digital version of refusing to run their code. The phrase also protects you from making commitments you'll regret. In high-pressure situations, we often agree to things out of fear, guilt, or haste. "Sure, I'll take on that extra project," or "Okay, I'll lend you the money," only to resent it later. By saying, "I'll think about it," you create a buffer between impulse and decision. That buffer allows your rational mind to catch up. You can evaluate the request on your own timeline, free from the manipulator's emotional influence. Even if you eventually say yes, it will be a clean yes, not a coerced one. Let's explore why neutrality can feel so threatening to manipulative people. Their power depends on controlling the emotional climate. If they can make you angry, guilty, or panicked, they own the frame. When you stay calm, you show that their frame doesn't encompass you. This threatens their identity because it reveals that their tactics are not universal. They only work on willing participants. In some cases, this exposure can even lead to change. A person who relies on manipulation may start to question their methods when they consistently fail to provoke you. In other cases, they may escalate briefly before disengaging. Either way, you've shifted the balance of power without ever raising your voice. It's crucial to practice tone and body language when using this phrase. If you say, "I'll think about it," with sarcasm or visible irritation, it becomes a fight disguised as politeness. The magic is in true evenness. Your face relaxed, your shoulders down, your voice steady. Think of a poker player revealing nothing through their expression. This physical calm reinforces the verbal neutrality, creating a force field around you. At first, it may feel forced, especially if you're naturally expressive. But with repetition, it becomes second nature. This approach also applies in parenting and education. Children are master manipulators not out of malice, but because they're testing boundaries. A child might scream, "You never let me do anything fun. I hate you." The instinctive parental reaction is either to argue or to punish harshly. Both reactions feed the drama. But a calm, "I'll think about it," followed by consistent behavior, deprives the tantrum of oxygen. Over time, the child learns that yelling doesn't move the needle. The same principle works with students testing limits in a classroom. The teacher who responds neutrally sets the tone for the whole group. In romantic relationships, this phrase can defuse emotionally charged moments. Imagine a partner saying, "If you really loved me, you'd cancel your plans and stay with me tonight." That's a manipulative framing. Responding with, "I'll think about it," buys time to assess what's really happening. Maybe there's a valid need beneath the manipulation, or maybe it's pure control. Either way, you're not making a decision from a place of guilt or defensiveness. Later, when emotions have cooled, you can have a clearer conversation about boundaries and needs. The practice of neutral responses has deep roots in Stoic philosophy. Epictetus taught that we cannot control external events, only our judgments about them. Marcus Aurelius wrote about viewing insults as the barks of dogs, no more worthy of rage than the wind. "I'll think about it" is a modern application of these principles. It's not about ignoring reality or suppressing feelings. It's about refusing to let someone else's emotional storm dictate your inner weather. By creating that small pocket of space, you become the eye of the hurricane. There will be times when this approach feels impossible. If someone attacks a core value or threatens someone you love, the urge to react will be overwhelming. In those moments, even a partial pause matters. Maybe you can't be perfectly calm, but you can still delay your response by a few seconds, take one slow breath, and say, "I'll think about it." That small act of restraint can prevent irreversible damage. Think of public figures whose careers imploded because of a single viral clip. Often, if they had bought themselves just a few seconds, they could have responded strategically instead of emotionally. Over time, this practice reshapes your relationships. People who respect you will adapt naturally. They'll appreciate that you take time to consider their requests. People who rely on manipulation will either grow frustrated and leave or adjust to healthier communication. Either outcome improves your environment. You're no longer trapped in cycles of drama because you've opted out of the game entirely. The next time someone tries to hook you with guilt, urgency, or insult, remember that you don't have to run their program. You don't have to give them your immediate answer, your raised voice, or your flustered apology. You can simply breathe, meet their eyes, and say, "I'll think about it." Those 4 words are not just a sentence. They are a shield. Behind that shield, you have the space to decide who you want to be and what you truly want to do. Over weeks and months, those small moments of choice add up to a profound transformation. You become someone who is not easily manipulated because you're no longer addicted to instant reaction. You are calm, deliberate, and free. And in a world that constantly tries to rush and rattle you, that freedom is revolutionary. Manipulators only have as much power as you allow them to have. This is a truth that many people struggle to accept because it feels easier to blame the other person for our anger or our pain. Yet every time you get angry, every time you rush to explain yourself, every time you defend your actions to someone who is only looking to provoke you, you are effectively handing them the strings to control you. They don't need to lock you in a physical cage. Your emotional reactions are the chains, and they are forged by your own responses. Imagine someone says something cutting or unfair. If you immediately rush to defend yourself, you've stepped into the arena they built for you. You're now playing their game by their rules. The more you struggle, the tighter the net becomes. Emotional immunity is about refusing to step into that arena at all. Stoicism does not tell you to become a cold, detached robot with no feelings. It's not about shutting down or pretending you don't care. It's about mastery, not numbness. Think of it like holding a shield made of invisible energy. When someone throws an insult, it hits the shield and simply falls to the ground. When someone tries to guilt trip you, their words crash against that shield and shatter. You remain standing, steady and centered. The shield doesn't stop them from swinging, but it stops their swings from touching you. This is what it means to be immune, not that the world becomes kind and gentle, but that your inner world is unshakable. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and one of the most famous Stoic philosophers, captured this perfectly in Meditations. If anyone can show me where I am wrong, I will gladly change. But if they merely attack me, I will remain as I am. In other words, Marcus welcomed constructive criticism because it served truth. But baseless attacks, insults, and manipulations were irrelevant to his sense of self. He didn't need to fight them because he didn't need their validation. Imagine having that level of calm authority in your own life. How much energy would you save if you no longer felt compelled to defend every decision to every critic? We see examples of emotional immunity playing out in public life all the time. Consider two leaders facing scandals. Leader A reacts with rage on social media, firing off defensive tweets at 2 a.m., doing live streams to set the record straight, and calling their opponents names. Every reaction adds fuel to the fire. The media latches on, the scandal grows, and suddenly their anger becomes part of the story. Leader B, facing a similar storm, remains calm and silent at first. When they do speak, they issue a brief, clear statement and then step back. They don't engage with every provocation, they don't give their critics free publicity, and they don't let themselves be baited into a shouting match. Within days, the storm begins to pass because there's no spectacle to feed on. The difference isn't the severity of the situation, it's the level of emotional immunity. Leader A gave their power away, while Leader B kept theirs intact. On a more personal level, think about arguments in relationships. A partner says, "You never care about me," during a heated moment. This is often an emotional grenade designed to elicit a reaction. If you immediately shout back, "That's not true," or "How dare you say that?" you're now locked in a cycle of accusation and defense. Both of you are drowning in the emotions of the moment, and nothing productive can happen. But if you take a breath, stay calm, and respond with, "I'm hearing that you're upset. Can you tell me specifically what you mean?" You've stayed behind your shield. You've redirected the conversation toward clarity instead of chaos. This doesn't mean you're ignoring the problem. It means you're choosing the battleground wisely. Modern social media makes emotional immunity even more crucial. A single negative comment can ruin someone's day, week, or even their career, if they let it. Trolls and online mobs thrive on getting a reaction. When you reply angrily to a cruel comment, you don't just engage that person, you invite hundreds of spectators into the conflict. Soon, you're not fighting one critic, you're fighting an audience. Emotional immunity online might mean not responding at all, or responding only with calm, brief statements. The less fuel you give them, the less satisfying the game becomes. Many seasoned public figures have learned this the hard way. Celebrities who clap back at every insult often find themselves embroiled in endless drama. Those who respond selectively or not at all tend to maintain their dignity and sanity. Building emotional immunity is not something that happens overnight. It requires daily practice. Just like physical health, one powerful exercise is journaling each morning about the potential challenges you might face during the day. This isn't about predicting disaster. It's about mentally rehearsing your shield. For example, you might write, "Today my coworker might criticize my project. Someone might cut me off in traffic. My child might have a tantrum." Then you remind yourself, these things are external. They cannot control me unless I let them. When a moment comes, you're not caught off guard. You've already seen it in your mind and prepared your response. Another essential tool is breath work or meditation. Your breath is the bridge between your body and your mind. When you breathe slowly and deeply, you signal to your nervous system that you are safe. This keeps the fight or flight response from hijacking your brain. Even just 2 minutes of focused breathing before a difficult conversation can dramatically increase your resilience. Meditation takes this further by training you to observe your thoughts and emotions without being ruled by them. Imagine sitting quietly and watching your anger like clouds passing in the sky. You don't try to stop the clouds or chase them away. You just notice them, knowing they will move on. This skill translates directly into real-life situations. When someone tries to provoke you, you can internally say, anger is here, instead of I am angry. That small shift in language creates a huge shift in power. It's also helpful to develop what I call anchor phrases. These are short, grounding sentences you can repeat to yourself when emotions rise. Marcus Aurelius had his journal for this purpose. You might use phrases like, "This is not about me," or "Their storm is not my storm," or "I don't owe anyone my peace." These anchors act like code words for your shield. The moment you feel baited, you whisper one internally, and it brings you back to center. Let me share a personal story. Before I started practicing Stoic principles, a single negative comment online could ruin my entire night. I'd read something cruel on social media and spend hours replaying it in my mind, drafting responses I'd never send, feeling physically sick with anger. Sleep was impossible because I was having imaginary arguments in my head. Once I began building emotional immunity, everything changed. At first, it was hard. My instinct was still to react, but I practiced breathing, journaling, and repeating my anchor phrases. Slowly, I began to notice the gap between stimulus and response. Now, when I read a negative comment, I can literally feel it hit the shield and fall away. Sometimes I even smile. The same words that once kept me awake now seem almost absurd. They no longer have access to me because I no longer hand them the key. It's important to recognize that emotional immunity doesn't mean passivity. There are times when you must act. Decisively set boundaries, report harassment, in toxic relationships. The difference is that you act from clarity, not from rage. A warrior with a strong shield still fights when necessary, but they choose the timing and the terms of battle. Without immunity, you swing wildly at every perceived threat, exhausting yourself and causing collateral damage. With immunity, you can conserve your energy for actions that matter. Consider the difference between two managers handling employee criticism. Manager A takes every complaint personally. If someone questions their decision, they respond with defensive emails, long meetings, and even punishment. Their team becomes fearful and resentful. Manager B listens calmly, evaluates the feedback objectively, and changes course if necessary. If the criticism is just noise, they let it go without retaliation. Their team feels safe and respected. Both managers hear the same words, but only one has emotional immunity. Over time, Manager B builds a strong, cohesive team, while Manager A burns out and alienates everyone. One of the most powerful modern examples of emotional immunity can be seen in public figures who endure relentless criticism. Think of a celebrity who has been the target of vicious tabloids. Some celebrities lash out, sue everyone, or spiral into public meltdowns. Others remain calm, focusing on their craft, giving brief, dignified statements when necessary. Over time, the noise fades because there's nothing to amplify it. The public senses their stability, and even the media moves on. This doesn't mean those individuals never feel hurt or anger. It means they process those feelings privately instead of putting them on display for manipulators to exploit. In a world where everything is amplified social media, 24/7 news, workplace politics, emotional immunity is a form of armor. It protects your inner life so you can show up fully in your outer life. Imagine going through your day without being yanked around by every rude comment, every traffic jam, every passive-aggressive email. Imagine having a calm, steady center no matter what storms rage around you. That doesn't just make you feel better, it makes you more effective. People trust those who are consistent under pressure. They look to you as a leader, even if you don't have an official title. Building this kind of resilience requires a mindset shift. You have to stop seeing your emotions as something that other people create and start seeing them as something you create with your interpretations. When someone insults you, they're offering a gift. You decide whether to accept it. If you accept it, you carry it with you, letting it weigh you down. If you decline, it falls to the ground, useless. This metaphor comes from ancient Buddhist teachings, but it aligns perfectly with Stoicism. No one can make you angry without your participation. They can invite you to anger, but you don't have to RSVP. One practical exercise is to deliberately expose yourself to small annoyances and practice neutrality. For example, stand in a long line at the grocery store and notice your impatience without acting on it. Drive in rush hour traffic and focus on your breath instead of the behavior of other drivers. These low-stakes situations build your immunity so that when high-stakes moments arrive, a confrontation at work, a family argument, you have the strength to stay calm. It's like training with light weights before lifting heavy ones. Over time, emotional immunity becomes a way of life. You'll start to notice patterns. Certain people will try the same tactics repeatedly, but they'll stop when they realize you no longer respond. Certain situations that once felt overwhelming will now feel manageable. You'll even start to see humor in manipulation. When someone tries to bait you and fails, it's like watching a bad magician fumble their trick. You can smile and move on, knowing you've outgrown the game. In the end, emotional immunity is about freedom. Freedom from being controlled by other people's moods. Freedom from the tyranny of your own impulsive reactions. Freedom to choose how you want to show up in the world. When you cultivate this inner strength, you become unshakable. Others may shout, scheme, or provoke, but they cannot touch your core. As Marcus Aurelius might say, the world outside can rage all at once. Inside, you remain as you are calm, steady, and sovereign. Stoicism becomes truly transformative when it's applied to everyday life, not just studied as a philosophy. In the workplace, where deadlines, egos, and competing priorities collide, the ability to remain calm can mean the difference between being respected as a leader and being seen as unstable or defensive. Imagine a boss who says to you in front of your colleagues, "You're always late." The natural, almost automatic reaction for most people is to defend themselves, to explain why they were late, or to point out times when they were early. This instinct comes from a place of protecting your reputation, but it almost always escalates the tension. The boss might double down, your colleagues might take sides, and suddenly the original issue, punctuality, becomes a battle over identity and respect. A Stoic response, however, rewrites the script by calmly saying, "I'll think about it." You are neither agreeing nor disagreeing. You are signaling that you heard the comment, you're considering it, and you refuse to engage in an emotional tug-of-war. This brief pause disrupts the expected cycle of conflict and can often de-escalate a situation before it spirals. Over time, such responses build a reputation for steadiness, and people begin to approach you differently because they know you won't be baited into reactive arguments. In corporate environments, power often manifests through subtle manipulations rather than outright commands. A coworker might make a cutting remark during a presentation, hoping you'll lose your cool and discredit yourself. A manager might use guilt to push you into taking on extra work, implying that saying no would mean you're not a team player. These are classic traps. When you respond emotionally, you confirm their narrative. When you respond stoically with calm, measured words, or sometimes with silence, you refuse to participate in their game. I've seen people turn entire office cultures around by consistently modeling this behavior. In one case, a friend of mine worked in a toxic environment where passive-aggressive comments were the norm. Instead of retaliating or retreating, she used questions to bring clarity. When someone said, "Well, I guess some people just don't care about deadlines," she calmly replied, "Could you specify which deadline you're referring to and what the impact has been?" This simple, non-confrontational question forced the other person to move from vague blame to specific facts, often revealing that their comment was more about drama than reality. Over time, others began to mirror her approach, and meetings became more constructive. In family life, Stoicism can be even more challenging because the stakes feel deeply personal. When someone you love says, "You never care about me," it hits a tender place. The instinct is to argue, to list all the ways you do care, to demand that they take back their words. But this rarely resolves anything. Instead, it turns the conversation into a scorecard of past grievances. A Stoic response focuses on understanding rather than defending. By gently asking, "Can you give me a specific example?" You shift the conversation from global accusations to concrete experiences. This does two things. It prevents you from being dragged into an emotional storm, and it invites the other person to express their feelings in a way that can actually be addressed. In many cases, what sounds like criticism is really a poorly expressed plea for connection. By staying calm, you create space for that deeper need to surface. I've seen this dynamic play out countless times in marriages and parent-child relationships. For example, a teenager might yell, "You never let me do anything fun." A parent who reacts defensively might shout back, grounding the teen and escalating the conflict. But a parent who responds with curiosity, "What do you mean by fun? Can you give me an example of something you'd like to do?" is practicing Stoic restraint. They're not giving in or ignoring the issue. They're guiding the conversation toward clarity and problem solving. This doesn't mean the teen gets whatever they want, but it does mean the parent maintains authority without losing emotional control. Over time, this models emotional regulation for the child, teaching them how to navigate their own feelings constructively. On social media, the principles of Stoicism are tested in one of the most extreme arenas. The internet rewards outrage. A single negative comment can feel like a personal attack, especially when it's public and permanent. The temptation to reply, to correct, to fight back is almost irresistible. But every time you engage, you feed the cycle. Trolls thrive on attention, and even a defensive response gives them what they want. Stoic practice here often means choosing silence not because you're weak, but because you refuse to let someone else dictate your state of mind. By not responding, you leave them alone with their own negativity. It's like refusing to pick up a rope in a tug-of-war. Without your participation, the game ends. There's a psychological principle at work here called extinction. When a behavior no longer receives reinforcement, it eventually fades away. A cruel commenter who gets no reaction will often move on to easier targets. This doesn't mean you never engage online, but it does mean you engage strategically. If a correction or clarification is truly necessary, you deliver it calmly and briefly, without emotional language. You don't argue point by point. You don't try to win over someone who is acting in bad faith. You simply plant your statement and move on. This approach protects your mental health and often earns respect from silent observers who see that you won't be dragged into drama. These practices might sound simple, but they are far from easy. They require immense self-awareness and discipline. That's why Stoics emphasize preparation. You can't wait until you're in the middle of a heated argument to start thinking about how to stay calm. You have to train your mind daily, the way an athlete trains their body. Marcus Aurelius began each morning by reflecting on the challenges he might face. Rude people, betrayals, disappointments. By anticipating these difficulties, he was less likely to be surprised or thrown off balance when they occurred. Modern Stoic practice might include journaling, meditation, or even role-playing difficult conversations. These habits build a kind of mental muscle memory. When the moment of provocation comes, you don't have to think about what to do. Your body and mind already know. The idea that silence equals weakness is deeply ingrained in many cultures. People assume that if you don't fight back immediately, you're letting others walk all over you. But Stoicism turns this assumption upside down. True strength is not in shouting the loudest. It's in having the power to remain still when others lose control. When you stay silent in the face of provocation, you are not surrendering. You are demonstrating mastery over yourself. This kind of strength often confuses manipulators. They rely on predictable reactions. When you don't give them what they expect, they lose their grip. Over time, they may even stop trying because it's no longer rewarding. Consider a real-world example. During a corporate crisis, two executives face public scrutiny. One goes on television, visibly angry, defending themselves at length and blaming others. The media seizes on every emotional outburst, and the story snowballs. The other executive stays calm, issues a brief, factual statement, and refuses to engage with sensationalism. Within weeks, the public narrative shifts. The first executive looks unstable and untrustworthy, while the second appears competent and composed. The difference isn't just in public relations strategy, it's in emotional mastery. The 3 key Stoic practices: pausing for 10 seconds, using neutral phrases like "I'll think about it," and cultivating emotional immunity work together as a system. The 10-second pause disrupts the automatic reaction, giving you space to choose. "I'll think about it" provides a verbal tool to defuse manipulation without escalating conflict. Emotional immunity builds over time, so that provocations that once felt overwhelming now barely register. When these practices are combined, they create a kind of psychological armor. You become less reactive, more deliberate, and ultimately more effective in every area of life. Applying these ideas doesn't mean you'll never feel anger or sadness again. Emotions are natural and necessary. Stoicism isn't about suppression, it's about navigation. You still feel the waves, but you don't let them capsize your boat. This distinction is crucial. People who misunderstand Stoicism sometimes think it's about being detached and indifferent. In reality, it's about caring deeply without losing yourself in the process. A Stoic parent loves their child fiercely, but doesn't let fear dictate every decision. A Stoic leader fights for justice, but doesn't burn out from rage. This balance is what makes Stoicism sustainable. In practical terms, here's how this might look in a single day. In the morning, you journal about potential challenges, a difficult meeting at work, a tense conversation with your partner, the possibility of online criticism. You set intentions. I will pause before reacting. I will use neutral language. I will remember that my peace comes from within. At work, when your boss criticizes you, you breathe deeply and respond with, "I'll think about it," instead of lashing out. At home, when a loved one expresses hurt, you ask for specifics instead of getting defensive. On social media, you scroll past a rude comment without engaging. At night, you reflect on what went well and where you stumbled, not to judge yourself, but to learn. Over time, these small choices add up to a profound shift. Marcus Aurelius famously said, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it elsewhere." This isn't just poetic language, it's practical advice. If you depend on others to behave perfectly in order for you to feel calm, you will always be at their mercy. But if you cultivate inner peace, you can carry it with you into any situation. Whether you're facing a hostile boss, a critical family member, or a swarm of online trolls, your center remains unshaken. This is the ultimate goal of applying Stoicism, to become the master of yourself rather than a puppet in someone else's play. In a chaotic world, that mastery is not just a personal victory. It's a form of quiet revolution. If you've made it this far, you now hold something incredibly rare: the keys to emotional freedom. You've learned how to pause for 10 powerful seconds when the world is trying to provoke you, how to disarm manipulators with a calm, neutral phrase, and how to build an inner shield so strong that no insult, no guilt trip, no toxic attack can shake you. Think about how different your life could look if you start applying these techniques today. Imagine going to work tomorrow and hearing your boss criticize you unfairly. Instead of snapping back or feeling crushed, you take a slow breath, count silently, and respond with steady composure. Suddenly, you're not just an employee, you're a leader, someone others respect because you refuse to be rattled. Imagine sitting at the dinner table with your family, and when a loved one throws out a hurtful comment, you don't spiral into an argument. You calmly ask for clarity, or you let the storm pass without being pulled into it. That kind of control is magnetic. It changes not just how people see you, but how you see yourself. The truth is, manipulators can only control you if you let them. Every outburst, every defensive explanation, every late night rant on social media is like handing them a piece of your soul. But when you choose calm over chaos, silence over shouting, you starve them of their power. You step out of the game entirely, and in doing so, you win. Remember Marcus Aurelius's words: "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it elsewhere." No one can give you lasting peace, and no one can take it away unless you allow them to. You are the guardian of your inner world. When you claim that role fully, the outside world becomes far less threatening. Now, here's my challenge to you. Don't just nod along and think, that was interesting. Take action. The next time someone tries to bait you into reacting, pause for those golden 10 seconds. Whisper to yourself, this is the trap. When someone demands an immediate answer, give them the calm, disarming phrase, I'll think about it. And each day, take a few moments to strengthen your inner shield through reflection, breathing, or journaling. These small, consistent practices will transform you faster than you expect. If this video spoke to you, please like it, share it with friends, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next lesson. When you share this content, you're not just supporting me, you're helping spread these tools to people who desperately need them, people who are tired of being controlled by others' emotions. And if you'd like to go a step further, you can click this super thanks button to donate directly. Your support helps us keep making deep, thoughtful videos instead of chasing trends or shallow clicks. Together, we can create a space where wisdom and calm are valued in a noisy world. As you go back into your daily life, carry this with you. Calm is not weakness. Silence is not surrender. And mastery of yourself is the ultimate victory. The storm will always rage outside, but inside, you can remain steady, unshaken, and free. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting. And thank you for choosing to be the kind of person who changes the game simply by refusing to play it.